She played poker just to pay the bills. No glamour, no colorful chips in bright casinos, just an old screen, a kid sleeping in the room next door, and a cup of reheated coffee in the middle of the night. But that night, something changed. No one expected it, not even her. But she walked away with $2 million in her virtual pocket. $2 million. All in one single game. But how did that happen? And what did she have to lose and endure to get there? This story isn't about luck. It's not about crazy bets. It's about someone who hit rock bottom and between despair and hope, found a hidden card that would change the game of life. You've probably heard stories like this. The janitor who became an investor. The street vendor who became a CEO. But this one has a detail that few share. She started playing out of fear, not with confidence. She was shaking, literally. Not because of the bet's value, but because, on the other side of the screen, the utility bill was already marking a cutoff for Monday. And still, she clicked. She played. She survived. She won. And this wasn't a fairy tale. It was a battle fought in silence. At home, no one knew. Online, everyone laughed when she said she dreamed of living off poker. After all, who would believe a single mom, unemployed, trying to make a living bluffing? The question that lingers is, what makes an ordinary woman with no elite education, no coach, no spotlight, turn a dismissed game into her escape plan? Was it luck? A digital miracle? Or is there a force inside her that only awakens when fear knocks at the door? One thing's for sure. What you're about to learn will make you rethink everything you know about failure, courage, and that last chip no one pays attention to. Because every comeback story begins with someone who was about to give up, but didn't. Before the spotlight, the headlines, and the $2 million that made the betting site news, she was invisible. Completely invisible. She'd say good morning to the world, and wouldn't hear a response. She'd walk through the gate with plastic bags on her arm, a shopping cart in hand, her kid in her lap, and no one would glance twice. Like she was just another one. And maybe she was. Just another woman trying not to drown in the rough sea of life. You know that routine that wears you down but doesn't give you room to stop? She woke up early to make coffee, get the kid ready, rush to the first gig. Sometimes she'd clean houses. Other times, she'd sell homemade candy at school. She even took care of the elderly for money that barely covered the gas bill. And still, she'd smile. Because when you don't have a choice, even a smile becomes resistance. The truth is, she never dreamed of being rich or famous. She just wanted the basics, not owing rent, having a clean record, and being able to buy her kid a decent pair of shoes without putting it on 5 payment plans. But even that seemed like luxury. She was always doing the math in her head, jotting everything down in a little blue notebook, the kind you get for free. And every end of the month was the same. More bills than balance. More, I'll pay later than it's paid. Sometimes her son would ask for pizza. She'd say, next week, sweetie. And deep down, she knew it wouldn't be that week, or the next. These little daily frustrations built up, not as anger, but as a silent pain from someone who knows life could be more, but doesn't know where to start. And like every woman trying to make it work, she also heard advice from people who never lived her reality. You need to study more. But study how, when there was barely time to breathe? Go look for a real job. Like cleaning, caregiving, and selling weren't real jobs. She was judged, silenced, disbelieved. One day, she mentioned to a neighbor that she had started playing poker online just to distract herself. She was met with, "You're going to lose everything." The phrase kept ringing in her ears for days, as if she had so much to lose. The irony was cruel. She'd already lost almost everything: her self-esteem, her time, her mental health, her hope. She just hadn't lost her courage, because even stumbling, she kept moving forward. It wasn't out of heroism, but out of necessity. Many think the bottom of the barrel is a dark and isolated place, but sometimes the bottom is the routine. Waking up tired, going to bed frustrated, and pretending everything is fine because someone depends on you. And right there, in that invisible point of life where no one cheers and no one sees, she had her first encounter with poker. But that's a story for the next chapter. What matters here is that before becoming a winner, she was pure resistance. Not with armor and a sword, but with worn-out slippers, a dented pot, and a raw kind of faith. There was no luxury, no time. And to be honest, there were no more expectations. All she had was an old phone, a shaky connection, and a drive that no one could measure. A drive to change, even if it meant playing the last chip of her soul. Destiny doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. And on that cold, early morning, that's exactly what happened. Her son was already asleep, curled up under the thin blanket he had gotten from a donation. The house was silent, except for the hum of the old fridge and the fan that insisted on creaking at its lowest setting. She sat on the worn-out couch, phone in hand, her eyes vacant, scrolling through the feed more out of boredom than interest. She wasn't looking for anything, but the algorithm, that new modern oracle, gave her a piece of the puzzle. A 30-second video about online poker. A regular guy saying that he started with free chips and through strategy had turned his life around. She laughed, not mockingly, but with that laugh of someone who no longer believes in magic. Even so, she watched it till the end. The next day, the thought returned, persistent. What if it's true? She didn't believe in shortcuts, but she was tired of the long, heavy paths her life had been on. She looked up more videos, read comments, found tutorials on YouTube, discovered she could play without betting real money, just to learn the rules. And that's when the realization, literally, hit her. She installed the app on her phone, chose some random name, something anonymous, almost as if she was embarrassed to be there. She played her first hand, trembling. She didn't understand the terms or the strategies, but the challenge sparked something in her that had been dormant for years. Curiosity. She felt challenged, intrigued. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't just life that was pushing her around. She was taking the initiative to understand a new world. She started playing at night, in secret, while the city slept. Yusin. Free chips, winning, losing, learning. When she scored her first significant win, a micro bet tournament that earned her $50, she didn't celebrate like someone who had won. She celebrated like someone who had survived. She paid the overdue electricity bill with that money. It wasn't much, but for the first time in months, she felt like she had done something with her own hands that resulted in something immediate, something outside the eternal cycle of spinning your wheels. It was like, for a moment, she had taken control of her own destiny, even though she still didn't fully understand what a flush or a properly timed bluff was. Of course, there was fear, a ton of doubts. Is this safe? Is it illegal? Am I fooling myself? But her instinct told her to keep going, and she did, cautiously, modestly, but with thirst. She started watching specialized channels, found online forums, discussion groups, and videos of games with commentary. Learned terms like small blind, all in, pot odds. She began recognizing patterns in other players' moves. Sometimes she'd jot things down in a little notebook, like she was studying for a test no one knew about. It became her refuge. While the world was shouting, "This won't lead to anything," she was quietly building a strategy she didn't yet know would change her life. What was interesting was that, even playing with virtual chips, or a few cents, she gave it her all, as if they were worth millions. Each hand was treated with discipline, every loss with self-criticism, every win with humility. And this didn't just shape the player, it shaped the woman behind the screen. Poker started teaching her about risk, patience, reading the situation, timing. Things life had already been trying to teach her, but here, in the game, they took form. It was during this process that she started to realize maybe it wasn't just a distraction. Maybe for the first time she had found a tool, or maybe even a door, a possible way out of the maze she was living in. Over time, she began testing different rooms, various platforms, and different tournament modes. Even without money, she used bonuses, played free rolls, seized every opportunity. One day, she entered a minimum bet game with promotional balance, and she won enough to buy food that week without needing to put it on credit. And that marked her deeply. If I can do this by myself, what else could I achieve if I take it seriously, she thought. That was when the game stopped being just a pastime. It became a plan, a timid, insecure plan, but still, the first one that made sense in a long time. This phase was like turning on a flashlight in a tunnel. The light was weak, but it revealed something she hadn't seen in a long time: direction. She didn't know if she'd go far, didn't know if it would work, but for the first time, she wasn't stuck. She was in motion. There were nights when she lost everything, even the free chips. But still, she didn't quit. The next day, she started over, and that taught her resilience, taught her to fall and get up quickly. She learned in practice what many pay a lot of money to learn in motivational courses: that persistence is the first trump card for anyone who wants to change their life. And even without realizing it, she was already playing a much bigger game than she had imagined. And the beauty of this phase was exactly that, in its simplicity. She didn't start big. She started small, with no money, no support, no applause. She started with what she had: time stolen from the early morning, courage borrowed from desperation, and a phone nearly out of memory. What she lacked in structure, she made up for in willpower. She wasn't playing out of ambition, she was playing out of survival. And when motivation comes from hunger, not vanity, the strength is different. It's rawer, more real, more dangerous. But like everything that starts to grow, inevitably, the hardest part was coming: the fall. Because the game doesn't forgive the inexperienced, nor the overly emotional. And that's exactly where her story took an unexpected turn. Every true rise comes after a painful fall. And for her, the fall wasn't quick. It was dragged out, silent, destructive in small chunks. After that first enchanting contact with poker, the small victories, the nights filled with $20 that felt like a lottery win, came the part no one posts on social media. The moment when everything falls apart. What seemed like a new path started to feel like a trap. She began investing the little money she had, playing with real cash. Nothing outrageous, $5 here, 10 there. But the problem is, along with the adrenaline of winning, comes the pride of thinking you already know enough. And the game, like life, charges a high price from those who underestimate its complexity. The first losses were small but painful. She tried to convince herself, it's part of the process, it's learning. But little by little, the losses started to hurt her pockets for real. That money she was supposed to use for the gas? Gone in one night when she got too carried away. The money for the weekend groceries? Lost trying to recover what she had already lost. And maybe the worst of it all, the trust. It wasn't just the pain of an empty wallet. It was the heavy silence after a loss. The wet pillow, her son's look, asking for things she couldn't give him anymore. It was the judgment in the mirror. How did I let myself get caught up in this? Poker, which once seemed like a new world of possibilities, turned into an emotional minefield. Each click came with a hidden fear, and then came the family's criticism. The ones who thought she was just playing games on her phone. When they found out she had lost real money, the lecture was inevitable. Her mom, heart heavy, asked if she was addicted. Her sister said she should look for a real job. Her friends vanished, and she started to doubt herself. Am I really fooling myself? That question kept ringing in her head. And like all pain, it brought along guilt, shame, and a desire to disappear. She thought about deleting the app, erasing the accounts, pretending none of it had ever happened. But inside her, there was a deep conflict. One part wanted to quit. The other, more stubborn part said, this couldn't be the end of the road. At this point, emotions hit harder than finances. She had dealt with overdue bills before, but she had never faced the feeling of failing at a dream that was entirely hers. Poker had been her private discovery, her secret escape plan. And now it was crumbling before her eyes. One of the hardest falls came when she lost the rent money. It was all she had in her Pix account, earned through side gigs over weeks. She entered a tournament thinking this would be her big break. But she didn't read the table properly, got caught up in emotion, and lost everything in less than 20 minutes. She just stared at the screen, as if waiting for the balance to magically appear again. It didn't. The landlord was direct. If you're late again, I'll have to ask you to leave. The threat was real. The pain, too. Maybe you think she stopped here, that she came to her senses, that she turned back. But it wasn't like that. Sometimes the fall is the push you need to fall to your knees and rethink everything. And that's exactly what happened. She cried. A lot. She cried on the kitchen floor, hugging her knees, trying not to make noise so she wouldn't wake her son. She cried over the frustration of having believed in something and seeing it slip through her fingers. She cried because she had no one to share the pain with. And the next day, she woke up differently. Not naive anymore, but also not destroyed. The fall had taught her a lesson no YouTube video could show. Poker, just like life, doesn't tolerate impulsive amateurs. And that, if she was going to play, she had to do it right. This phase of failure also brought something important: self-awareness. She realized emotional patterns. She noticed she played worse when she was tired, anxious, or trying to recover losses. She saw that she couldn't treat it like a plan B relying on luck. It was either she took it seriously or she'd walk away hurt. And that's when an idea began to grow. If I really learn, can I make something real out of this? It was no longer beginner's excitement. It was the rational decision of someone who had already taken a beating. And that internal shift was crucial, because there's a huge difference between quitting out of fear and pausing to understand the game. She chose the second. During this phase, she started watching testimonials from professional players. She found out that many of them had also gone through bankruptcies, addictions, breakdowns, and comebacks. She realized it wasn't just her, that making mistakes was part of the process. But those who win are the ones who turn mistakes into fuel, not trauma. She started seeing poker in a new light, no longer as a game of chance, but as a complex system that requires study, strategy, and mindset. And that began to spark a new fire, the fire of rebuilding. But it was still an unstable ground. The fear of losing again, the ghost of failure, the silent shame of being labeled as too much of a dreamer. All of it still lingered. And even so, she decided to return. Not impulsively, but with discipline. And that was the turning point that would begin to change everything. Because when pain meets decision, the strength that few are willing to build is born. She knew the road ahead would be tough, that she'd have to stay up late, rethink habits, study what she had never studied, discipline herself like never before. But she also knew that this would be her only real chance to turn the fall into a foundation. And this is exactly where the new phase begins, when the survivor decides to become a strategist. The line between giving up and pushing forward is thinner than it seems. And in that moment, she was standing right on that line, teetering between the urge to quit everything and the intuition whispering, "One more time." But something changed. The pain that once paralyzed her started to turn into fuel. It wasn't motivation, it was a decision. She realized that no one was going to save her. There wouldn't be a consolation prize for trying. It was win or go back to the same cycle of odd jobs, bills, and frustration. And like someone turning a key with the last drop of energy, she decided if she was going to play, it would be with excellence. No more amateur moves, no more emotions. It was time to treat poker like it was the business of her life. Because it was. The first change was radical, routine. She cut distractions, limited social media, set schedules. She stopped seeing poker as a pastime and started seeing it as a profession. While many slept, she spent her nights watching videos of professional players. She didn't watch like a fan. She watched like a student. She took notes, paused, plays, studied every decision. She started following forums like 2plow2, participating in closed group communities, looking for books like The Mental Game of Poker by Jared Tendler and Harrington on Hold'em. She was a self-taught learner by necessity and disciplined by survival. She didn't study to win. She studied not to go back to square one. And that difference in purpose made all the difference. With every new concept she learned, she tested it with humility at the tables. She didn't bet on impulse anymore. She started analyzing positions, calculating probabilities, understanding her opponents beyond the cards. She made a spreadsheet to track wins and losses. She even wrote down her emotional mistakes. Played tired, shouldn't have gone on tilt, didn't fold the pocket aces when I should have. Learning to lose was one of her greatest assets. Before, every fall was a trauma. Now, it was raw material. She saw failure as an opportunity to refine herself. And that's rare, because it takes courage to face your own mistakes without punishing yourself. Few do it. She did. The first conscious victories started to come. Small paid tournaments, low buy-ins, but with consistency. A top 10 here, a final table there. And more important than the cash prize was the feeling. I'm capable. That feeling, when it comes from within, is transformative. It doesn't come from applause, likes, or luck. It comes from commitment. She no longer needed external approval. With every tournament, she won more than chips. She won self-confidence. And that kind of strength no one can take away. The difference started to show in her everyday life. She felt more alert, more analytical, more strategic. She learned to breathe before making decisions, in the game and in life. She began to parent her son with more presence. She realized that poker was shaping something much bigger than technical skill in her. It was shaping a new identity. And that identity was forged in discipline, not luck, in dedication, not haste. She started investing part of her small winnings in specific courses, like those from Upswing Poker and Poker Code. And whenever she lost, she went back to studying. Evolution became an addiction, but this time an addiction that built her up. It wasn't fast. It wasn't easy, but it was real. She began to stand out at the smaller tables, to be recognized in the groups. She received invites to play bigger free-roll tournaments, and little by little she raised her stakes without skipping any steps. She never thought she was ready, and maybe that was her biggest advantage. She knew she was constantly under construction, and that kept her humble. Instead of getting excited about the small victories, she celebrated by studying more. Every dollar won was reinvested in learning. She didn't just want to play better, she wanted to be a strategist. A player who could dominate the game with a clear head and a steady hand. And it was in this growth, in this constant rhythm of learning, failing, correcting, and growing, that she started to prepare, unknowingly, for the biggest challenge of her life. A tournament that would change everything. A table that would gather dozens of experienced opponents, with high stakes and even bigger bets than she had ever faced. But for someone who had already lost everything and decided to grow anyway, there was no fear of losing. Only the clarity that now she was a different woman. A woman with a firm purpose, a prepared mind, and a heart that, even though scarred, was ready to risk it all in one last, decisive hand. It all started with a notification, an almost unnoticed ad on some random platform. Special tournament, guaranteed prize, $2 million. It seemed too far away, almost like an advertisement designed to impress amateurs. She didn't even consider clicking. But that week, something was different. She had scored some small victories, accumulated a symbolic amount in her account, and more importantly, she was mentally strong, disciplined, technical. Ready or not, something inside her said, try. But the buy-in was more than she usually bet. It was, literally, putting everything she had on the line. Not just money, but hours of study, sleepless nights, hopes, and trauma. One last emotional chip, even if no one on the outside knew. She spent the next few days studying the tournament's history, reading everything she could about the finalists from previous editions. She watched old games, analyzed strategies, understood patterns. She even observed peak times. She knew experienced players like to enter in the middle of the night when the table was sharper. When she clicked confirm entry, she felt a nervous excitement she hadn't felt even in her worst losses. Because here, for the first time, it wasn't just a move. It was a leap, a conscious leap into the unknown. The initial table was tense. Players from all over, different profiles, strategies hard to read. She started with caution, avoided risks, analyzed movements, let the impatient ones eliminate themselves. It wasn't time to shine, it was time to survive. Her stack was small, but solid. She played coldly, waiting for the right moment. A well-executed bluff early on gave her confidence. It wasn't luck, it was reading. An opponent bet heavily, trying to force her out, but she noticed the pattern in his behavior. He always did that when he didn't have strong cards. She called, and won, small pot, big internal turn. But the tournament wasn't kind. After some good rounds, she lost badly in a messy hand. 2 pairs against a set. She almost got eliminated. Her stack plummeted. For a few seconds, desperation threatened to return. That old feeling of, I'm going to lose everything again, started to linger. But then she did what she had learned in the lonely nights. She breathed, got up, walked around the room, washed her face, remembered everything she had overcome to get there, and returned to the table with the same coldness as before. It wasn't emotion that guided her now. It was method, strategy, resilience. With a steady hand, she started to regain ground. Slowly, with patience. Every move was a battle. She had to deal with aggressive opponents, sneaky players, and most importantly, her own mind. The hunger gnawed at her, but she didn't eat. The tension was so thick she even forgot to drink water. Her hands sweated. Her son slept in the next room. She played with headphones, silently, like someone carrying a secret the world couldn't know. And maybe it was a secret. Who there would imagine that the focused, cold player was a woman fighting not for trophies, but for survival? She made it to the final table with fewer chips than most. The pressure was insane. One wrong move, and it was all gone. But, as always, she relied on her greatest weapon: observation. 8 players, 7 eliminated in just over an hour. She was still there, between ups and downs, doubling bets with clean bluffs, folding high pairs when she saw danger. She played with a heart shielded. And finally, the last hand. She had a pair of queens. The opponent had a bigger stack, betting big. She looked at her stack, looked at the screen, and remembered everything. The kitchen floor, the overdue rent, the pizza denied to her son, the nights of studying hungry and hopeful, and she went all in. Silence. Time stopped. The opponent thought, hesitated, and called. Flop. Nothing changes. Turn. She's still ahead. River, queen. She didn't celebrate right away. She just stared at the screen, motionless, as if the system was still going to say, connection error. The game wasn't recorded, but no, she had won. With that card, she won the tournament. The prize, $2 million. Digital, real, impossible, but true. There was no crowd, no champagne, just her, the glow of the monitor, the sound of the platform's notification, and a breath held in her chest that took minutes to release. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She stayed silent. A heavy silence from someone who doesn't know whether to break down or give thanks. Because there, in that dark room, with her son sleeping in the next room, and an old blanket on her back, an ordinary woman had done the unthinkable. She had won. And what came next? No one could predict. But one thing was certain. That night wasn't just a tournament. It was the final proof that, even when the whole world says it's impossible, there's a secret play. One only the courageous make. She won. She won. And even with the $2 million already in her account, the glow didn't come in the way many imagine. There was no screaming, no crystal trophy, no dancing in the middle of the room. Her reaction was different, almost silent. First came the freeze, a shock that paralyzed her for a few minutes. She just stared at the screen, the numbers there, clear in dollars, while her brain tried to process what it meant. The mouse still in her hand, but the click wasn't necessary anymore. The game was over, and she had done the impossible. Turning a cold digital screen into the doorway to a new life. The first few minutes were the most confusing. She breathed with difficulty, her heart racing, her hands trembling. Not out of fear of losing, but because she didn't know how to process that victory. It was as if her body was still trying to catch up with her soul, which already knew, you did it. When she finally took a deep breath, set the phone aside, went to her son's room, and simply watched him sleep, that was when it hit. Not with pain, but with a sob that had been held back for years. She cried for everything she had kept inside for months, maybe her whole life. She cried for the sleepless nights, the times she had nothing to put on the table, the judgments she had faced, the dreams she hadn't given up on. It wasn't a cry of joy, it was a cry of liberation. In the days that followed, the reality slowly began to sink in, like someone who inherits something and doesn't know what to do with it. Of course, the first action was practical. She paid off all her debts, all of them. Having a clean name after years felt like a second prize. Then, she rented a decent apartment in a safe neighborhood where her son could play without worry. She didn't buy anything extravagant. No luxury cars or lavish vacations. Her transformation wasn't just in her bank balance, it was from the inside out. She knew she couldn't let the money consume who she was. Because what had gotten her here wasn't wealth, it was resilience, it was focus, it was discipline. Every step she took was calculated with almost a maternal care. She opened a separate account just for investments, hired a financial planner, started studying personal finance. She didn't want to repeat the cycle she had seen in so many other stories of people who won big and lost everything in no time. And more than that, she wanted to build structure, security, freedom. She bought a new laptop, set up a study and work corner at home, created routines to keep learning. Because deep down, she knew the game continues. The only thing that changes is the board. The most beautiful part, perhaps, was how she began to see her own story. Before, she saw herself as someone trying to escape defeat. Now she saw herself as a strategist, a player of life, someone who didn't just survive, but used the cards she had to win with dignity. This internal transformation was the biggest prize. Yes, the money changed the scenery, but the mindset was what solidified everything. Today, she doesn't see herself as lucky. She sees herself as someone who deserved it, someone who built it, someone who harvested what they had planted in the silence of the night while the world slept. Her transformation didn't go unnoticed. The family, which had once criticized her, now looked at her with respect and admiration. The questions had changed. From, "Are you really going to keep doing this?" to, "How did you get there?" Her son began to look at her with different eyes, and so did she. Now she could proudly say, "Mom won." But more than that, now she could offer him something she had never had: stability, peace of mind, time. Things that are priceless, but that she knew exactly how much they cost. Over time, she began to understand the weight of what she had done. Interview requests started coming in, invitations for podcasts, live sessions with other players. At first, she turned them down. She still felt out of place in this new role. But gradually she started realizing that her story wasn't just hers. That many other women faced similar dilemmas, and that by sharing her story, they might find the courage to take the first step. She began to share her journey honestly. She spoke about her failures with the same ease as she did her victories, without romanticizing, without embellishing, with truth. And that truth became strength. She started receiving messages from strangers, single mothers, young women in debt, lost women, all saying the same thing. You inspired me. It touched her deeply. She realized that what she had lived through couldn't die with her, that the transformation couldn't stop with her. She started thinking about creating content, maybe a channel, maybe a course, maybe just a space to hear other voices, but everything in due time. Because now she knew she didn't need to rush anymore. The survival marathon was over. Now it was time to build with ease. That transformation, at its core, was what she had wanted most. Not the millions, not the fame, but peace. The freedom to choose. To say yes to her son without doing the math. To buy medicine without breaking it up into installments. To think about the future with at least a minimum of security. Poker was the means, but courage was the engine. What made everything change wasn't the right card at the right time. It was the right woman, with the right mindset, willing to learn, fail, and start over. That no one can take, that not even time can erase. And in the silence of the new home, now with windows that face the morning sun instead of the neighbor's dirty wall, she remains steady. She no longer plays out of necessity. She plays by choice. But the heart is the same. The focus is the same. And her story isn't over yet. Because true transformation isn't the end point. It's the starting point for something even greater. Today, she wakes up differently. Not with the frantic alarm warning that the bus is coming in 10 minutes, or the anxiety in her chest from a bill due tomorrow. She wakes up on her own time, wakes up with the sun streaming through the window, hearing her son laugh from the other side of the house. And no, it's not about luxury. She still has clothes to wash, food to prepare, bills to organize. But now, all of that happens under a new light. The difference lies in what she carries inside herself. The feeling that she's won a battle no one saw, and now she can finally let her guard down without fear of crumbling. She continues to play. Not because she has to, but because she chooses to. Because poker, to her, stopped being an escape plan and became a way of living with clarity, logic, and emotional control. And more. It became a gateway to something even bigger. She started teaching. At first, timidly, responding to messages on social media. Then, recording short videos, sharing her experiences, mistakes, and lessons. Today, she guides other women who see the game as a chance to rebuild. And the most beautiful thing is that she doesn't just teach about cards. She teaches about mindset, consistency, and self-control. Because she knows what changes your life isn't the hand you're dealt. It's what you do with it, over time. She created a small social project, helping single mothers, women in vulnerable situations, people who, like her, had been judged for dreaming too big with too little. She organizes discussion groups, free classes, and online mentorship. It's not about charity, it's about connection, about showing that there is a way, even when everything around you screams no. She became a role model. And even though she doesn't always feel ready for that role, she's learned to embrace it with humility. Because she knows that legacy isn't what you leave behind when you're gone. It's what you build while you're alive. Today, people ask, was it poker that saved your life? And she answers with a serene smile, poker was just the stage. I saved my life with courage. That answer says it all. Because her story isn't about the game. It's about decision. About daring to start over, even without guarantees. About looking at chaos and seeing strategy. About falling 1,000 times and getting up 1,001. And now, looking back, she understands. The money was just the result. The real victory was finding herself again. It was taking control of the narrative of her own life. And if you're reading this now, maybe you're also looking for your decisive move. Maybe you're wondering if there's a chance for you, if there's still time. The answer is yes. But don't wait for the perfect hand. Play with what you have. Make the little into a lot. Turn fear into fuel. Turn mistakes into lessons. Because in the end, that's what separates those who watch life pass by from those who change the course of the story. And you? Will you keep waiting for the ideal hand? Or will you play with courage? Now tell me, what was the move that gave you chills in this story? That moment that made you hold your breath as if you were on the other side of the screen with the final chip in hand? Because, let's be honest, everyone carries an impossible tournament inside themselves. It might not be in poker, maybe it's in real life. When it's time to pay a bill, make a decision that changes everything, or hold on when it seems like there's no way out. And maybe, just maybe, you're one move away from your big turn. But then comes the hardest question. Would you have the courage to risk your last penny in a game like this? And I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about time, energy, faith. Would you bet it all on a plan that no one believes in, but deep down, you know could work? Because that's what separates the people who tell stories from the people who live them. Most stop at what if. She didn't stop. She went. Even without certainty, even with fear. And that's why, today, we talk about her. So, if this story touched you in any way, do this. Subscribe to the channel now, turn on the notification bell, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. It could be that friend who's at her breaking point. The cousin who keeps saying, "I wasn't born to win." Or even yourself, to remind you on the tough days that there is indeed a way out. That there are ordinary people doing extraordinary things with courage and strategy.